friend. It's all worth it in the end. And when you got nobody to turn to, just hold on and I'll find you. I'll find you. I'll find you. Just hold on and I'll find you.
I'm hanging on by a thread, and all I'm clinging to is prayers. And every breath is like a battle. I feel like I ain't come prepared. Death's knocking on the front door, pain's creeping through the back. Fear's crawling through the window, waiting for them to attack. They say don't get bitter, get better. I'm working on switching them letters. But tell God I'ma need a whole lot of hope keeping it together. I'm smiling in everyone's face. I'm crying whenever they leave the room. They don't know the battle I face. They don't understand what I'm going through. The world's trying to play with my soul. I'm just trying to find where to go. I'm trying to remember the way. I'm trying to get back to my home. But I can't do this on my own. That's why I'm just trusting in you. Cause I don't know where else to go. And I don't know what else to do.
So fight a little longer, my friend. It's all worth it in the end. But when you got nobody to turn to, just hold on and I'll find you. Just fight a little longer, my friend. It's all worth it in the end. And when you got nobody to turn to, just hold on and I'll find you. I'll find you. I'll find you. Just hold on and I'll find you. I'll find you. I'll find you. Just hold on and I'll find you.
They say fear haunts and pain hates. They say pain strengthens and fear drives faith. And I don't know all of the outcomes, don't know what happens tomorrow. But when that ocean of doubt comes, don't let me drown in my sorrow. And don't let me stay at the bottom. I feel like this hole is too deep to climb. I've been looking for a way out, but I settle for a peace of mind. Picking up the pieces of my life and hoping that I put together something right. Tell me all I got is all I need. Tell me you gon' help me stay and fight. The world's trying to play with my soul. I'm just trying to find where to go. I'm trying to remember the way. I'm trying to get back to my home. But I can't do this on my own. That's why I'm just trusting in you. Cause I don't know where else to go. And I don't know what else to do.
Don't let the fear make you feel like you can't fight this on your own. Cause you know I'll be there for you no matter where you go. Oh, you'll never be alone, no. So fight a little longer, my friend. It's all worth it in the end. Cause when you got nobody to turn to, just hold on and I'll find you. Just fight a little longer, my friend. It's all worth it in the end. And when you got nobody to turn to, just hold on and I'll find you.
Find me,
I'll find you.
find me,
I'll find you. Just hold on and I'll find you.
find me,
I'll find you.
find me.
I'll find you. Just hold on and I'll find you.
If this is your first time here, my name's Adam, and no, that's not normal. We don't normally rap in church, although we'd like to make it more normal. I don't know. We're interested in that. So you caught us in the middle of a series called Playlist, and what we do in this series is we're taking songs that are not necessarily like in the Christian genre, and we're looking at the messages that the songs present, and kind of comparing what the song says with what the Bible says, what the artist says with what God says, and seeing that there's some overlap, that there's some true things in some of these songs, and then there's some lies that are built into them. So we're just kind of taking a look at that and kind of training ourselves to think and hear in a way that is analytical when we listen to songs outside of the Christian genre. Now, today we cheated a little bit. I'm going to be honest with you. We cheated a little bit today. The song we just heard is a song called "I'll Find You" by Lecrae and Tori Kelly. And some people would consider Lecrae a Christian artist. Some people would say that. If you asked Lecrae, though, if you actually talked to him, he would tell you that he is a hip-hop artist who happens to be a Christian, okay? So there's a difference between the two. And I don't believe the song we just heard is overtly Christian, right? You didn't hear anything about Jesus in there. You didn't hear anything about the cross in there. It definitely has some faith undertones in there, but it wasn't overtly Christian. And here's what Lecrae had to say about this song, if you want to know like the inspiration behind that song. he said this: "At the time of the song's composition, some of our loved ones were battling cancer. And we wanted to encourage them to hold on and tell them we were here, waiting, hoping, praying, fighting with them. Some have been released from their pain forever. Others are still fighting, holding on." And I thought, man, that's really cool that the bullseye of this song was someone who might be tempted to give up. That's who this song is aimed at. Somebody who is at the end of their rope, someone who's going through something that maybe there's like a slim chance of victory, that they're trying to do something, but it's like, you're probably not gonna succeed here. Someone fighting against steep odds. And if you listened, the chorus, listen to the chorus. This is the message from the outside to the person who's struggling. Just fight a little longer, my friend. It's all worth it in the end. But when you've got nobody to turn to, just hold on and I'll find you. It's supposed to be this refrain. If you're struggling today, this was the message to you. There's payoff in the end if you don't give up. Just hang on. And then I love the assumption here that the person who's struggling to not give up, the person who's really trying to hold on, they're going to hit the point when they need like outside help, that they can't hold on their own strength anymore. And we've got nobody to turn to. Just hold on and I'll find you. That's really powerful too. So if you're a person who's trying to help somebody who's struggling, look at what she said. She didn't say, "Come find me." She said, "I'm going to go help you." And I think sometimes Christians, we do this. We have this tendency when somebody's hurting, we say this thing. It's almost like it's a knee-jerk reaction out of our mouths. "Let me know if you need anything." Right? We say that. And we mean it. I'm not saying it's disingenuous. But do you know somebody who's really hurting? They're going to have a hard time doing that. Matter of fact, I would say the percentage chance of them actually reaching out to you is pretty slim. That they actually need you to be a little bit more, I'll call it aggressive, politely aggressive. They need you to be assertive. They need you to be more on offense and actually say, "Hey, I'm going to help you. Hey, we're going to lunch. Hey, I'm going to call you." Like, don't wait for them because they're already hurting. They're already hurting. So if you've got somebody in your life who kind of falls into this category, man, reach out to them. Like, you be the aggressor. You be the one who says, "Hey, you need something here," and find them. Find them. Don't wait for them to come to you. And this is also, by the way God works. That's the way the gospel works, right? Is that we don't have to climb our way to God. God climbed his way to us. We didn't find God. God found us. And that's the whole essence of Christianity. And I love that that's in the undertones of this song. Now, this is the chorus, and then we flip when we go to the verses. The verses are from the perspectives of the person who's struggling. I don't have time to go into the whole thing. If you've ever listened to Lecrae, his lyrics are so rich. We could do an entire sermon series just on the stuff that's in this song. But I just want to give you a flavor of what he did here. So he says, "I'm hanging on." No, that's too far. "I'm hanging on by a thread, and all I'm clinging to is prayers, and every breath is like a battle, and I feel like I ain't come prepared." So they're barely hanging on. Like, prayers are like a lifeline. Like, man, just barely keeping your nose above the water. Every moment is a battle. And then this little admission at the end, almost a guilt-ridden admission that I was not ready for this. That I got completely sideswiped. I didn't have my armor on. I was not ready for this battle. And I feel like I'm losing because of that. Like, maybe if I would have been ready for this thing that hit me, I wouldn't be as behind as I am now. But because I didn't see it coming, I'm just at a disadvantage. I feel like I'm playing catch up. Then he says, "Death's knocking on the front door, pain's creeping through the back, fear's crawling through the windows, waiting for him to attack." This feeling of being surrounded by death and pain and fear, like no matter what the vulnerability is, these things are finding their way in, and there's nothing that can stop them from coming. Just kind of having to endure them, waiting for the attack. And then he says this, man, they say don't get bitter, get better. I'm working on switching them letters, but tell God I'm going to need a whole lot of hope keeping it together. You don't have to hip hop to at least appreciate these first two lines. That's pretty sweet, isn't it? I wish I would have had this last week. Don't get bitter, get better. I'm working on switching them letters. Amazing. I'm going to need a whole lot of hope, though, to keep it together because I'm hurting. And then he says, I'm smiling in everyone's face. I'm crying whenever they leave the room. They don't know the battle I face. They don't understand what I'm going through. The idea is that people may know you're hurting, but they don't understand you're hurt. right? They may know your battle, but they don't understand your battle. They may know you're in pain, but they don't understand your pain. They know your struggle, but they don't understand it. And that is a really difficult place to be in your life, where they know about it, but they don't understand it. And would it kind of put you in this place to kind of put on a mask and say, you know what, it's not even worth trying to explain. I'm just going to tell you I'm good even though I'm not. Because if I tell you I'm not, then I have to try and explain it, and you're not going to understand it, and you're not going to treat me the way I really need to be treated anyways. People just don't get it. So what I want to talk about today is what to do when you have the strong desire to give up creep into your heart unexpectedly, uninvited. What to do when you're hanging on but your grip starts to slip. What to do when you're holding a heavy weight and your legs start to shake and your back starts to give out. What to do when the desire to keep going is eroded away and it's replaced with the desire to quit. And you can't really remember when it happened. You don't know when you switched from wanting to keep going to wanting to quit. You just know where you're at now is that you're done. When that thought, forget this, pops into your head. But you probably don't use the word forget. You use a different word that starts with the same letter because you're a sinner. And somebody said amen. This is Mosaic. So if you're sitting, this message is for you today. If you're sitting here going, I don't know if I can keep going. I don't know if I can keep going. I don't know if I can keep going in this relationship. It's draining me. I don't know if I can keep going. I don't know if I can keep going at this job. I can't handle my boss. I can't handle these people anymore. I don't know if I can keep going, like searching for purpose and meaning in my life. I think I'm just ready to kind of pack it in and just accept meaninglessness. I don't know if I keep going in this pain. I don't know if I can keep going just being an adult in this world. I think I'm just going to kind of slip into not caring. This message is for you if you feel like whatever situation you're in, you're losing your grip and you're ready to give up. How can you hold on a little longer, my friend? And what I want to do is I want to do a little mini case study of a person who didn't quit over an extended period of time. And I want to look at how in the world that happened. How did he hold on as long as he held on, and kind of compare and contrast a person who would give up versus a person who wouldn't give up. So that's what I want to do today. Before we jump into that, would you pray with me? Jesus, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for bringing every person here that's sitting here, Lord. I don't think you did that on accident. And I pray for the people right now who are feeling like they're at the end of their rope, are feeling like that desire to give up has now taken over, Lord. And I pray that you would be here and you would be present and not just like passively present, Lord, but you would kind of press on them right now and assert yourself in their souls, Lord, so that they would know you're here and know that you have something to say to them today. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, the guy I want to look at today is one of the most famous characters in the Bible that there is. We're going to look at David, okay? If you've made a list of your top famous Bible characters, Jesus is at the top, and I think you could argue that David's actually number 2. You could have your theological discussion, but David's up there. Everybody knows David, right? Everybody knows David. Even if you've never been to church and this is your first time ever coming to church, you're like, yeah, I know who David is. David took down Goliath, right? He is like the prototype underdog. He is the one we use as an example to say this is what an underdog is, David versus Goliath. So he's that guy, the slingshot guy. But if you grew up in church, you also know a little bit more about him, right? So not only did he take down the giant, he's also an artist. He's a singer-songwriter. I don't know if you know that, but a lot of the Psalms, the biggest book in the Bible, David wrote a lot of those. So he had this artistic skill as well. So not only was he tough enough to kill you, he was artistic enough to write a song about it afterwards, okay? So this guy he's got range, man. He can do it all. And he ends up being king of Israel. He goes down as one of Israel's greatest kings. He's actually used continually as an example of how the kings that come after him should rule. He's always looked up to. So what I want to do with David, I don't want to zoom in on any one story. I don't want to usually, pastors can preach all different kinds of ways. Sometimes you can get out a microscope and you look at the story and you look at all the details of the story. What I want to do is I want to back way up and kind of look at his whole, like a span of years in his life, get out the telescope and kind of see what we can learn by looking over the hills and the valleys of what he experienced, okay? So we're going to hit some stories. I'm not going to do any of them justice. So you're going to be like, but wait, there's more. Yeah, there is more. I'm not doing it. I'm skipping them, okay? So we're just going to hit the high points and the low points here in David's life. Where we meet David is in 1 Samuel chapter 16. So brief backstory, just so you know, when we meet Daniel, at the time Daniel kind of gets introduced to the Bible, Saul is the king of Israel. And Saul, he started off kind of good, but then he turns into kind of a tool bag, and he just does. It's not in the Bible. That's my interpretation of what it is. And he has a lot of potential, but he blows it. And God decides that Saul should not be king anymore. So he sends this prophet named Samuel to go anoint a new king. And Samuel gets sent to this guy in Jesse's house. Jesse has a whole bunch of sons. Samuel's like, one of these sons is supposed to be king. So he's kind of going down the line, seeing these different sons. And God's like, no. And then here's what happens starting in Samuel 16, verse 11. Then Samuel asked, are these all the sons you have? There is still the youngest, Jesse replied, but he's out in the fields watching the sheep and goats. Send for him at once, Samuel said. We will not sit down to eat until he arrives. So Jesse sent for him. He was dark and handsome with beautiful eyes. And the Lord said, I don't know why that's important. I felt weird reading that. I don't know why. This is the one, anoint him. So David gets anointed king. I mean, this is it. This is where we meet Daniel. Anointed king. Right out the gate. That's crazy. The first thing I want you to notice is where he is when this happens. Where he is when he gets this call to be king over all Israel. Where he is when he gets like the calling of his life. He's watching sheep. He's watching sheep. He's doing his job. Nothing extraordinary, nothing special. He is just faithfully doing the thing that he's supposed to do. And I think, this is an assumption, but I think that David, I'm going to see, here we go again. David, he had dreams, right? He had aspirations. He wasn't like, this is it. This is the peak of my life. I'm a shepherd. I'm watching sheep. This is awesome. I don't think so. Matter of fact, I think God probably had planted some seeds in David's heart saying, hey, I've got big things in store for you, man. You've got a huge calling on your life. Like, I bet he had a sense of purpose. He had a sense of like destiny built in to how he felt. And yet, even with that grand calling, even with that magnetic draw upward, he was still faithful in this little job that he had currently. This is a huge, huge thing for us to see. Even though he had these dreams, these aspirations, he was being faithful in the small things that he was currently doing. Because I think, man, I don't know about you guys, but I struggle sometimes when I think God's called me to something bigger, and I kind of start to despise the smaller thing that I'm doing now. Like, I expect God to move in this big way, and I almost feel it's like a promise God has given that he's going to do the spectacular thing. And then I'm tempted to get sloppy and careless in my current role because I'm looking up instead of looking down at what I'm supposed to be doing. I think the message we can learn here from David is, man, don't do that. God found one of the greatest leaders to ever live in a field watching sheep. That's where he found him. It wasn't a gradual rise to power. It was that guy watching sheep, king, now. That's crazy. God can find you in whatever obscure job you're at. He can find you. God has not forgotten about you. God's not like, hey, where did I put that guy? I was going to use him at one point. Now I don't know where I put him. He's just somewhere in the field somewhere. He knows. One of the things I've heard a lot of great leaders say, I don't even know who to give this credit to because so many of them said it. I don't know where it goes back to. But if serving is beneath you, then leadership is beyond you. This is a really huge concept. But David, in his serving, he was trained and prepared and even in a way like it was his rite of passage, the test he had to pass. Will he serve faithfully in the small things, therefore be given greater things? And I would even switch this and say, man, if serving is beneath you, maybe even your calling, your purpose, your dream is beyond you. Maybe this is like the serving part, the working in obscurity part is the test to say like, hey, what's your character? What are you really like? What are you willing to do, what God is calling you to do now, and prepare for what he's calling you to do later? Are you willing to be the servant? Because it's when David is serving in one of the lowest positions that God anoints him for one of the highest positions. And this is what I want to point to if you're struggling with the desire to quit. I'm looking at this as a characteristic that David had that we need to look at. People who don't quit are willing to work in obscurity. They're willing to work in obscurity. And here's why this is important. Because if you're working in obscurity and the spotlights aren't on you and you're not getting all the glory and all the praise, nobody even notices what you're doing, you're going to have to find some kind of intrinsic value in what you're doing. You have to, right? If the spotlight's on you, you're not getting praise, you're not getting the accolades from outside, you're going to have to find it somewhere. And I think David, watching those sheep, somehow found it in himself to say, you know what? God's called me to this right now. I'm going to do my best right here doing this thing, even though nobody is watching me. The kind of people who don't quit, man, they find purpose even in the small things. They're able to dig down deep and actually say, hey, if God thinks I'm doing a good job at this, that's all I need. That's all I need. That's enough gas in my tank to get me through. And I feel like that's the way David thought. He found purpose in even the small things. All right, so he's anointed king right here, chapter 16. And the crazy part is his age at this point. Believe it or not, he's 13-ish years old. Many scholars believe he was 13, early teens, is how old David is when God makes this decree, this promise, you, king, shepherd boy. Now, what I want to do, I want to jump to the next chapter. I'm just going to kind of jump chapters here. So, boom, king. Chapter 17 is where we find his most famous accomplishment. Chapter 17 shows us where he takes down Goliath. I would love to preach on the whole thing, but I'm just going to jump right to the good part here, verse 48. As Goliath moved closer to attack, David ran quickly out to meet him. Reaching in his shepherd's bag and taking out a stone, he hurled it with a sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. As the stone sank in and Goliath stumbled and fell face down on the ground. I love a lot of things about this story. It's one of my favorite stories. But one of my favorite parts is the fact that David ran quickly at the giant, towards the giant. Some of y'all, when you face giants, you're running. It's a different direction that you're running. But David ran towards him. He ran towards it, and he didn't just stand there either, right? So it's not just a neutral position. It was an aggressive, offensive position that he took. There's a giant. I'm going after him. What a simple but powerful message. And I was thinking about this today. I wonder, so we've talked about a lot, your ability to see on two levels. You don't just want to see in the physical, you also need to see in the spiritual. And I wonder if David wasn't kind of playing that game as he walked out there, that he actually didn't see himself as the underdog. Isn't it possible that maybe David walks out there going, what are you guys talking about? Yeah, he's big, but hello, flip down into this new way of looking at things. Because if you know David's speech, when he's talking trash, and he talks trash to Goliath, which is awesome. I want to preach the whole thing, but I can't. But he says the thing, you come to me with a sword and a spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord our God. So he's like, yeah, you've got all the physical attributes that you should be able to just wipe the floor with me, but dude, you're outmatched. I'm not the underdog. You are. And that's the thing that gives him the passion to run towards the giant rather than away from him. Because he just saw on two different levels. It didn't make sense. And if you read the story, you've really got to read this. Maybe you should read this week. Read it. David's almost incredulous. Like, why isn't anybody taking care of this yet? He's like looking out there at this giant, like, why is no one taking, isn't God on our side? Like he's blown away because he's just seeing on two different levels. And that is so important for you. This is another characteristic of somebody who doesn't quit. I want to call it a gutsy faith. They have a gutsy faith. And what I mean by gutsy, it's obviously out there. It's like more than most people, but it's not just that. It's a little bit unpolished. Like, it's controversial even. When David runs out there to do this thing, not everybody's like, yeah, go get him, David. Some people are like, dude, that guy's lame. Why is he doing that? His own brother questions his motives. And I think sometimes when you take that stance of faith, some people are going to look at you and go, they're not doing it for the right reasons. And you got to be okay with that. And you just have to take a crack at trying something crazy, like putting yourself in a position to say, God, if you don't move, I'm dead. Like, that's a crazy position to put yourself in. But what's cool about David is that, that's the way he thinks. He took risks for the glory of God. That's why he wasn't an adrenaline junkie. He wasn't doing it for his own glory. He was doing it like, hey, God, I want to show people how big you are. So I'm going to do this thing. And God's like, all right, let's do this. And he puts himself in these positions where God's going to get the glory if something good happens. Because there's no way David could get it. There's no way David could get it. His risks were always to make God famous. So let me ask you, do you have gutsy faith? Do you have gutsy faith? Are you a scrapper when it comes to your faith? Now, at this point in the story, David's about 19. So if we're following, it's 13-ish when he gets anointed king. Now he's 19. So it's been over half a decade. Now, I don't think that's a long time, right? 6 years is a long time. But I don't think he's antsy yet. God said you're king, you're not king yet. I think he's good. I don't think he expected to, while he's going through puberty, to get the crown. I don't think that was his expectation. And now he's taking down Goliath. So I think he's probably okay with the trajectory of his life at this point. Anointed, 13, killed a giant, 19. Pretty good resume for a 19-year-old, right? You're doing okay at this point. He's probably not discouraged. He's probably okay. Now, things get a little complicated after that. I don't have time to go into all the details. But basically, Saul, who is the lame duck king, still king but not king, he gets jealous of David, understandably. He throws a spear at him, one of two. Okay, so he throws the spear at him the first time. We're going to look at the second time here in a minute. This sounds serious, I'm going to say, but it's not that bad compared to what Saul does eventually. And this one kind of gets bottled up. So Saul throws the spear at him, kind of has an anger outburst, but then he gets it in check. And he ends up giving David a promotion almost immediately after trying to kill him. And I know that's weird. Maybe you know somebody like that. Maybe your boss is like that, yells at you. You know what? Good job. Here you go. I don't know. That's kind of, Saul was kind of all over the place emotionally. And so here's what he does. He had some motives behind it as well. Finally, Saul sent him away. So it wasn't just a promotion. It was a get out of here. And appointed him commander over 1,000 men. And David faithfully led his troops into battle. David continued to succeed in everything he did, for the Lord was with him. So he gets a promotion. Rightfully so. He took down a giant, right? So he spends his early 20s kicking Philistine butt and taking names. This is David's early 20s, okay? And he's conquering everything in front of him. Grows as a leader, as a warrior, as an artist. He does everything with excellence. At this point, it's not easy, or it's not hard to not give up, right? He's okay. He can just keep going. Everything's going the right way. There's no temptation to give up at this point. Anointed king, killed a giant, got a promotion, winning every battle, growing in popularity, growing in fame, growing in all these things. He's not discouraged right now. He's not tempted to give up. But at his mid-20s, his whole life gets turned upside down. That trajectory, that path that he feels like he's on, he's probably getting this fever pitch. Here it comes. Here it comes. God told me I was going to be king at 13. Here it comes. Man, I have to be close. Chapter 19, one chapter later, Saul hurled his spear at David, second time. But David dodged out of the way, and leaving the spear stuck in the wall, that's how hard he threw it, he fled and escaped into the night. Then Saul sent troops to watch David's house. They were told to kill David when he came out the next morning. But Michal, David's wife, warned him, if you don't escape tonight, you will be dead by morning. How crazy. I mean, you look at the trajectory of David's life, and all of a sudden, wham! King's trying to kill me now. He becomes a fugitive overnight. An enemy of the crown that's supposed to be his, by the way. Don't you wonder what his prayers were like this night? Because he wasn't at home. His wife said, get out. By the way, Michal's Saul's daughter. She knew her daddy. That's why. You better go, man. He's going to kill you. So David leaves. He doesn't spend the night at home. Who knows where he put his head down that night. But can you imagine the thoughts going through his mind? God, what are you doing? Whoa. You did all this work. You brought me all here. You brought me here. The trajectory was this obvious direction of me ending up as king. Everything was going the right way, and now the total opposite. How can I become king if I'm a criminal? How can I take the throne if I've got a death warrant hanging over my head? What are you doing, God? This has to be the first kind of place where David really faces some stiff discouragement in his life. And he has to run. He has to run from a very well-resourced guy, the king of Israel. He has to run from him. And Saul chases, and initially David runs to the Philistines. And if you're like, the Philistines, wait a minute, isn't Goliath from Philistine? Yeah. He has to run to the enemy territory to get away from Saul. And he runs to the Philistines. And so while he's there, the commanders he goes to Gath, which is Goliath's hometown. It's where he ran to. Maybe it was just a stupid move on his part, but he runs to Gath, where Goliath's from, and he shows up, and the commanders are all having this conversation, and they're like, hey, isn't that the guy that like killed Goliath? Like, what do we do? Why is he here? And he's listening to them have this conversation. Here's what he does. Look at what David does. David heard the comments and was very afraid that King Achish of Gath, what he might do to him. So he pretended to be insane, scratching on doors and drooling down his beard. Finally, King Achish said to his men, must you bring me a madman? We already have enough of them around here. Why should I let somebody like this be my guest? Funny, like well done, David, but also massively depressing, right? You have to run to your enemy's country because your home country's king wants you dead. And the only way you escape one thing is to jump to this thing, but then even to escape that, you have to pretend to be crazy just to not get killed there. What happened to that 13-year-old, God? Remember when you anointed me with oil and said king? Remember that? Now I'm drooling down my beard. The distance between those two things is crazy. God, what are you doing? Can you imagine him laying his head down on his pillow? Don't you think he might have been tempted to say, forget this? Yeah, forget this. Don't you think these lyrics probably would have resonated with him? Death's knocking on the front door, pain's creeping through the back, fear's crawling through the windows. I'm waiting for him to attack. I think David would have been like, yep, that's me. I got Saul, I got the Philistines, everybody, I'm surrounded. He could have, at this point, said, done. Awesome dream you gave me, God. Thank you for that. I'm not going to pursue that anymore. I'm out. Forget Israel, forget Philistine. I'm going somewhere else. I'm taking my talent somewhere else. I'm out, God. I cannot do this. I'm done. And so, I don't know if you guys do this. I always put myself in the shoes of the biblical character, and I like to believe that I would make the right decisions. But man, wouldn't it be difficult? What if you were here and you had all this happen to you? Would you give up at this point? I mean, nothing's gone right. All these good things are like erased. I don't know if I could have done it. I don't know if I could have kept going. Pursuing that dream, pursuing that thing that God said. I would have been tempted to quit, very tempted to quit. And I don't know if I would have made the right choice. And by the way, think about that. He's in his mid-20s now. He's had a crazy, awesome run, but then a crazy, awesome crash. If he quits now, you don't know his name. You might hear about Goliath, but it would be like, what was that guy that took down Goliath? Yeah, I don't know. It was pretty cool though. You wouldn't know him. If he would quit now, his whole legacy would be destroyed. So he runs again. And here's where he goes. He goes to this cave in Adullam. And I learned something this week. I looked up this cave. I was really excited about this. So the cave of Adullam is located in the valley of Elah. The valley of Elah is where David took down Goliath. Which I didn't know that they were that close. I always heard about the cave, and I'm like, oh yeah, I went to a cave. I knew that David had went to a cave at one point in his life, but I did not realize that it was so close to where he took down Goliath. Many scholars believe it was only like a couple of miles away from the actual battle. He hides in a place very close to one of his greatest victories in his life. And don't you think he probably went out and walked out there? I had to imagine some night, some starry, moonlit night, he walked out. And he stood where he stood, This is it. The big guy was right there. You were standing behind me, God. Where are you now? That being all the way down, I'm running from Saul, I'm running from the Philistines. Everything that you did, it seems like it's gone. I stood right here and watched you do a miracle. What now, God? Can't you just see that struggle, that pain that he had to be enduring there? 10 years after his greatest victory, standing there now in the midst of his greatest defeat. His prayers had to be crazy. We actually don't have to imagine, because he wrote one down. I want to show it to you. Psalm 142. Here's what he said in the cave. I cry out to the Lord. I plead for the Lord's mercy. I pour out my complaints before him. He poured out his complaints. You're allowed to. David did this as an example for us. And I tell him all my troubles. When I'm overwhelmed, you alone know the way I should turn. Wherever I go, my enemies have set traps for me. I look for someone to come and help me, but no one gives me even a passing thought. No one will help me. No one cares a bit about what happens to me. Then I pray to you, O Lord, and I say, you are my place of refuge. You are all I really want in life. Hear my cry, for I am very low. Rescue me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring me out of prison so I can thank you. The godly will crowd around me, for you are good to me. Man, I feel like there's so much built into this, just kind of like the Lecrae lyrics are so thick. That's just thick. He's pouring his guts out onto the paper, pouring his guts out to his God. And this is a characteristic of someone who does not give up. They press into God rather than push away. David could have ignored God. He had every reason to be mad at God here. Every reason to say, not just forget the dream, forget you for giving it to me. I'm done. He could have, but he didn't. He pressed in. He complained. He poured it out. He said, God, what are you doing? You said this. No, God, no. And he engaged it. He wrestled with God. God respects that. For some reason it seems disrespectful, but God loves it when people lock horns with him, when they're hurting. Do it. Don't just complain to your friends. Complain to God. Bring it all the way up. Bring your complaints to the highest court. He likes to hear those. Now notice where he landed. He landed in all right, if you show up, I know that you're here and it's going to be good. I just need you, I need you, I need you. And he expresses, you're like the only thing I need. You're the only thing I need. I can't do it with anything without you. I need you. So if you're feeling like quitting, let me ask you, are you engaged with God or disengaged? Are you pressing in or pushing away? Now, look what God does immediately. I think that what I just read you, Psalm 142, happened in the first sentence of David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. Psalm 142 is written. Soon his brothers and all his other relatives joined him there. Then others began coming. Men who were in trouble or in debt or who were just discontented until David was the captain of 400 men. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, right? He asks God for help and God gives him an army. He does, almost immediately. A tribe, a people. Misfits, rebels, outcasts. I love this verse. It reminds me of us. But he put David in this place with these men. And like David's this too. It's not really surprising that this is the kind of person that was magnetically drawn to him, because he was the rebel, he was the misfit, he was the outcast, he was the fugitive. He was discontent. He didn't really have a real debt, but he definitely had a price on his head. He was definitely in trouble. People just like him were drawn to him. He said, God, I'm alone. And God says, here you go. Here's some people. And David's like, wait a minute. No. I mean, yes, this is what I asked for, but I should have been more specific maybe. But what I want you to see, if you want to not quit, if you want to not give up, if you want to distance yourself from that desire, you need a people. You really can't do it on your own. You can't. There will be times where you're going to get knocked down, and if there is not someone there to say, come on, you're going to stay down. You're not built to do this alone. You're not. You need a people who will have your back. You need a people who will get their shoulder underneath your arm and say, okay, you can't walk right now, but I can, and I'm going to carry you with me. So, and obviously I'm going to advocate that this should be your people. This should. You shouldn't just come to church. You should be a part of the church. You should build relationships, serve, invest. Don't just be here, but be here. By the way, if this is your first time here, this is not some weird asking to marry you on the first date kind of thing. I always hated that. Growing up in church, it's like, it's your first time here. Do you want to be a member? Do you want to serve? Do you want to give? Do you want to can we just get to know each other first? So if this is your first time here, this is not my hard sell to say, let's do this right now. But I'll tell you, I don't care where you end up, you need a people. You need a people. Whether it's here or not, you need a people. Every single one of us does. You need a tribe, you need an army. And like it, by the way, if you feel like a misfit, this is us. This is us. I've told you guys this before. I've never felt like I fully fit in anywhere in my life. I've always been kind of halfway in, halfway out, and that was I grew up in church, but I always felt like I was kind of there, but kind of not, kind of like I got it. I definitely believed the same things, but it definitely didn't feel like I belonged at all, and this has been my story all the way through, and that's why I feel like God called me to make a place like this, because I was like, there needs to be a church for these kind of people who feel like, yes, I believe that, but I don't like them. And you might have to edit that out, Larry. By the way, the coolest part about this is these guys, man, if you know the story of David's mighty men, if you don't know it, type it into Google, you'll find it. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere in Samuel. There's 2 places, actually. Look it up, because these guys, these mighty men, they end up doing amazing things. Like David taking down Goliath is like a one part of a highlight reel. These guys kill lions with their bare hands. They take on armies by themselves. They are just warriors for God. And here's where they started. This was the starting point, man. The cave, where David cries out to God, God, you have to do something. I need a people. And God's like, here they are. And David works with them, and they eventually become this nearly unstoppable group of people to do what God wants them to do. And that gutsy faith that David had, it was like contagious, man, because they're saying, well, my captain took down a giant. Well, my captain did this. I'm going to go after that lion. The guy who chases by the way, the lion, he chases it. Sound familiar? It's an active thing. It's not like he was defending himself. He chased it down into a pit and killed it. So crazy kind of stuff like that. But that's the thing. And that's what happens when you have a people. You're better because of it. You're like, there's good stuff that's contagious, and we make each other better when that happens. And you're so much less likely to give up in life when you have a people who are still going, saying, come on, we're doing this together. You need that. You need that. So check this out. David does not become king until he is 30 years old. Calling at 13, coronation at 30. 17 years between his calling and his coronation. 17 long, hard years. Some of it good, some of it bad, but it was that messy middle where it could have went either way. Is that where you're at? Somewhere between your calling and your coronation? Somewhere between, I know God called me for, like he's got something for me, but I'm not there yet. I'm somewhere in here. Maybe I'm up here, maybe I'm down here, but I'm not here yet. The message from David is meant, do not give up. The only thing giving up does is guarantee that you won't get there. That's the only thing it does. Hold on a little longer. Keep pressing. If you give up, you're never going to see that coronation. I don't want to end with this. I'm like embarrassed. I'm going to nerd out like all the way out, okay? All the way. It's a quote from Lord of the Rings. It's not even the worst part yet. You're thinking like Gandalf, or Aragorn, like one of the cool characters in the nerdy thing that I'm going to talk about. But I'm going to go to the nerdiest character in the nerdiest thing ever. This is a quote from Samwise Gamgee, okay? Frodo's friend, if you're not familiar. Talk to Taylor Jones afterwards, he'll explain it to you. Here's what he says, and this is awesome. This is absolutely, I have this saved as a note on my phone. I read it every once in a while. I know, it's all wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here, but we are. It's like all the great stories, Mr. Frodo. All the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were, and sometimes we didn't know how it would end. Because how could it end happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it is only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it will shine out all the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something. Even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going because they were holding on to something. And yes, I am a total nerd because I'm crying as reading a stinking Frodo quote. But I tell you what, he's not wrong. Every great story you've ever read, including David's, had plenty of places where he could have turned around and you would have never heard about him. No great story. Nothing. And yours is the same way. You can keep going and have the chance at God doing something spectacular, or you can give up and guarantee that it never happens. So hold on. Hold on. God's going to do something.